Hi, good evening everyone. Welcome to Brookline Booksmith's author event series. My name is Myra, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Curtis Boyd and Glenna Halvorson-Boyd in conversation with Deborah Bartz. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Thank you for keeping your phones on silent during the event. This event is being live streamed. Hi YouTube. So if you don't want to be on camera, just avoid this general line of sight during the event. But it'll be shut off during the signing, so no worries then. There'll be time for a Q&A, so get your questions ready. If you haven't yet picked up your pre-ordered book, or if you'd like to buy a book, you can do so at the register right back there after the event. Thank you for buying books with us and supporting our store so we can continue to make events like this one possible. Now on to tonight's speakers. No, that's perfect, thank you. Deborah Bartz, MD, MPH, is an associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Harvard Medical School and on faculty at Brigham and Women's Hospital in the Division Complex Family Planning. As director of the BWH Ryan Training Program, Dr. Bartz has been innovative in expanding primary care specialist, resident, and medical student training to include evidence-based abortion care through simulation and through guided models of training. Curtis Boyd, MD, is nationally known for developing abortion procedures and standards of care. He is also recognized for his expertise in pain management and minimizing surgery risk. Furthermore, Dr. Boyd was involved in establishing the National Abortion Federation and is a founding member of the Federation's Board of Directors. NAF serves as a forum for abortion providers and others committed to providing quality abortion services so that they remain accessible to all women. Finally, certainly not least, Glenna Halvorson-Boyd, PhD RN, served on the National Abortion Federation's Board of Directors and as NAF's president for 2 years. She's an accomplished counselor, trainer, and consultant with a national reputation for her training of professionals in this field. Dr. Halvorson-Boyd has a PhD in human and organizational development. Her previous publications include the book Dancing in Limbo, Making Sense of Life After Cancer. So folks, these people know what they're talking about. Tonight, we are here to celebrate We Choose To, a memoir of providing abortion care before, during, and after Roe. In this deeply personal account, Dr. Curtis Boyd and Dr. Glenna Halvorson-Boyd reflect on their lives in abortion care, from the childhood experiences that shaped their paths to the Supreme Court decision that forced the closure of their Dallas clinic. We Choose To is a story of that partnership and the staff and the patients that have shaped the history of modern abortion. In these pages, Curtis and Glenna share their holistic, morally rooted approach to their work. Led by a desire to empower patients, they advance abortion and mental health care further than ever seen as they find themselves in the center of a controversial new issue in American life. Sweeping, introspective, and deeply honest, We Choose To is a rare portrait of abortion providers and the world in which they work, where abortion is not a talking point in a culture war, but a private, even spiritual act. Please welcome Curtis Boyd, Glenna Halvorson-Boyd, and Deborah Bartz.
Thank you, everyone. It is a real treat to be with you here tonight. That was quite a bio for all of us, very humbling. I just want to say I'm a Brookline resident, and it is such a thrill for me to be here at the Brookline Booksmith with all of you as we really celebrate community and the community right now during the election season, as we're kind of dealing with our own feelings that we might be feeling as it relates to certainly this topic of abortion and social justice and women's rights and health. So thrilled to be here with you all. I did meet Glenna in 2007 at a psychosocial workshop, which really was a celebration of community of those of us who provide abortion services. And this book is a deeply rooted memoir co-written by both of our panelists here today that starts at their childhood and moves through, 80 plus years. But, sorry, didn't mean to out you. He's proud.
She's not 80.
And well over 50 of those years deeply rooted in service to women in an incredible way, with really a circling back from what you first experienced in your professional livelihood to what you're experiencing now. A few caveats. So I'll moderate until about 7:40, and then I'd like to open it up to discussion and questions from you all. So please hold your questions, but pocket your questions. Think of them, please. We'd love to hear from you. Just any trigger warnings, just want to make sure people are aware, we're going to be saying the word abortion here tonight. We are going to be talking about trauma, medical trauma, both as patients and as providers. And so I just want to make sure that everybody's on board for a healthy, robust, honest conversation. So let's see, I'm going to start. So this really is quite a memoir, I must say. 50 plus years of incredible seismic shifts that were brought on to both you, Glenna, and Curtis. Shifts that outsiders brought on to you, but that you actually took on yourselves, that you kind of ran into the fire with. You both narrate your lives through reflective, incredibly vulnerable, heartwarming stories. This is borderline, nonfiction. This really is a fantastic tale. A lot of it is about relationships, your relationships with other people, your relationships with each other, your daily personal investment in uplifting your patients and social justice causes. One of my favorite quotes is when Curtis, you say, abortion care is is different from other medicine. It is a commitment to a social cause, women's liberation in general and reproductive justice in particular. It is nothing less than an effort to change women's place in society. Glenna and Curtis, if you could, why did you write this book? You're extremely forthcoming, transparent, and heartfelt in your narrative. What was your overarching goal as you were writing?
I'll start, which means by definition, Curtis will take pleasure in interrupting me. It works. We have a lifetime of making that work. Frankly, we wrote the book with the modest intention of changing hearts and minds. Only that, which is what's driven our work all these years. And we wrote it not for those of us who are deeply committed to reproductive freedom and know absolutely where we stand, although I'll appreciate you, nor for those who are fervently opposed to abortion. We wrote it for real people, all the people who have mixed feelings about a complicated issue and are honest with themselves about the mix of feelings that attend most important major life decisions. We wrote it for all of the women and those who love them, who have had abortions, illegal and legal, through all of these years, and not necessarily felt seen or heard in their experience. So that's really who we were writing for. Ready to interrupt me? Or not?
Can you speak up a little, Glenna?
Yeah, thank you. Keep reminding me to do that.
And is mine loud enough? Can you hear me? No. How about now?
Yeah,
No?
yeah.
Gotta get right into
Tip
the
it in, tip it in.
It was for multiple purposes, I think, in writing the book. We started thinking about writing this book years ago. And then we thought, well, we're never going to get around to writing it because there's so much work to be done. And writing the book writing the book is a lot of work. So we kept delaying it. I'm going to tell you one reason we wrote, especially in the the three women that was responsible. I will talk about one of them. A dear friend, she was an Egyptologist in Chicago and down in Santa Fe, good friend. And she kept saying, Curtis, you need to write this story. You have a unique story, you and Glenna. It spans over 55 years. And if you don't write this story, it may never be written. And if it does happen to be written, then someone else is going to be writing it. And they can't possibly write your story because it's too long and too complex. No, they're never going to know it. Write it. I said, yes, we will. So she kept, several times she kept bringing this up. And finally, Glenna, I said, we've got to write this book. so Glenna started. Now, you need to know, this book exists really because of Glenna. We wrote the book together. It's our experience together. She's the writer. She is the writer. She's a brilliant writer. The book would not be as good without her. I'm a good storyteller, better storyteller than she is. She's a better writer than I am. So we worked well together, but she's the driving force. I could not have sat there for all those years. She sat there all day long, day after day, writing, editing, making me read the book again.
I tortured him.
I said, do I have to read it again? And so, yes, you have to read it again. So but the book has been worth it in the end because we wanted to tell this story to people to know. We wanted to be away from the political. We didn't want to write politics. We didn't want to write the religious controversy. We don't want to write violence. That's what some of the publishers wanted us to write about. And we said, no, that's not the book we want to write. And we decided if we have to, we'll just write it self-published because we wanted it in the archives. And we wanted to tell this story to go into the archives. And then we came across, I'm going to give credit to Disruption Press, we came across, and it's a small press, that's what we got. They said, well, you can, we said, we want to do this book. They said, well, it's interesting. I think we might like to do this. I said, but we want to write the book we want to write. And they said, that's fine, right? That's what we want you to do. Write the book you want to write. We'll help you. So, wow, that was it.
One of my main goals tonight is to help you understand who Glenna and Curtis are, both to help, and as well as to help you understand their book. I think it's really telling that they open with the prologue. They do talk about the first time that one of their clinics was arsoned, mostly from the perspective of their response to it. And just to help you understand who these people are, they went to the wreckage and they eventually found who was responsible, and they advocated for, instead of those individuals getting pulled up on federal charges, they actually advocated for state charges instead to have a lesser sentence. Very quickly, a very forgiving mindset as it related to this fascinating story that you weave just in the first prologue. So, very compelling book, but incredible people that you have in front of you. I'll just say that.
Two young men, there's only to spend a whole life in prison. And what good was that going to do? They made a mistake, they made a bad mistake, they knew it. They don't need to spend their life in prison.
I'd like to turn to you as the audience for a moment and just ask you to think about who it was and what care was like before the passage of Roe v. Wade. So think about the 1960s, the 1970s. What do you have in your mind as it relates to what that care was and who the people were that were providing that care? There's certainly some myths about nefarious self-promoting characters that took advantage of people in the shadows when they were the most vulnerable. The reality is that the people who provided abortion after the passage of Roe v. Wade were the same people, just like Curtis, who provided abortion services before Roe v. Wade. Curtis, you were actually a preacher before you became a physician. In chapter 1, you said, early in your medical career, your patients came and, quote, trusted me to provide a bit of wisdom from both professions. It was from this uniquely moral space of working as a physician and a preacher that prompted you to meet the pleading needs of your patients and provide illegal abortions in Texas before 1973. Once you made that decision, I count rather rapidly at least six sequential losses that you had to weather. You lost your medical practice partner and best friend. You lost your family medicine practice. You lost your residence in your hometown and eventually had to leave your state. You lost your first marriage. You lost your religion, at least as you once knew it. And you lost your professional community and standing, now taking a role within medicine that was highly stigmatized and vulnerable as an abortion provider. What do you want the reader, as well as today's audience, to know about your own identity as an abortion provider and about other people who provide abortion services?
That's a long story. We could expand the book a few chapters on that, and if we ever write another one, we will. But where to start? I grew up interested in philosophy, really, but we were subsistence farmers in rural East Texas. The nearest city was 10 miles away, and that city was 5,000 population. There was 75 miles to Dallas, so it was remote. All poor subsistence farmers. Fundamentalist religion, but I grew up with a strong teaching that the basis of our place in the community was service and compassion, duty to those in the community. So there was a sense of community, the church community, a family community, the community of greater community, to always be available to help as needed, answer any call day or night that came to you. And I believed in that life. I also grew up with the belief that Jesus died on the cross. He said, never deny me. I stood for the faith. I never denied the faith. Don't deny me even unto death. So death, you said, wasn't something I feared in the usual sense. I did abortion because of the commitment to what it meant. If that involved risk, I had to accept those risks. Whatever that risk was, I would have to deal with it. I decided I'm going to accept this risk knowing what I'm doing. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be resentful. I choose to do this. I can quit anytime I want. So that's the way I went. I want to stay a decent human being, maintain a sense of love and service, and do what I could, and hope for a good outcome. And I got a good outcome, but it didn't matter. The risk was, had to take the risk, and I had to accept that. But then I tried to put it in a box. See, I didn't want to spend time dwelling on that. I wanted to be a happy person, engage my patients, giving them good care and service. I just put it aside. So and just so you know, it has been a major change. I left that quickly while I was in medical school. I joined the First Unitarian Universalist Church, not unfamiliar to Bostonians, which is sort of the motherland of Unitarian Universalism. I've read about it in history, and I knew about all these famous early unioners who were Unitarians, and I didn't know too much about what it was, but I kept being interested in it, and I've discovered that's where I really belong, to more open. So, and that's what I wanted for women. One reason I did it, I wanted a woman, and it's what we feel now about the book. I mean, the book's written the way it is. This is a book that says we take no position whether a woman has an abortion or doesn't have one. We have our personal feelings about that. You can imagine what that is, but not with patients. They come, we're there to assist them in resolving this, doing in some what they want to do, whether they want to continue the pregnancy or end the pregnancy. Whether it's an easy decision, which, and for most women it's not too difficult. For some women it's very difficult. They can't even decide the first time they come. They may come back a second, the third time. Those are unusual, but I'm just saying that every woman has her own story. And we wanted to be, what we wanted was her to be able to decide for herself whether she wanted to continue the pregnancy or end the pregnancy without someone else deciding for her and forcing their opinion upon her. And that's really what we want for our society about all the issues. It's what we don't have today, which makes me very sad.
Glenna, you've been working besides Curtis in his clinic, which quickly became your shared clinic ever since 1974. You write, quote, "My career is no accident." At this time in the mid-1970s, while physicians were recently free under legal status to figure out best surgical practices to optimize physical health outcomes for abortion, you wielded your psychologic studies to develop the field of abortion counseling to help patients more holistically beyond the surgical procedure. However, a big part of your career has been counseling and protecting the emotional health of those who work within abortion care. In fact, as I mentioned, that's how you and I first met at a national psychosocial workshop developed to protect the emotional health of young abortion providers. You write, quote, "Among our staff, we talk with ease about the importance of patients being at peace with their abortion, although we seldom speak of it publicly. Curtis and I have the same concerns for ourselves and our staff. An abortion is a brief event in a patient's life, so it seldom becomes a central sense of themselves. But for those of us who choose this work, it becomes part of our identity, often a significant part. Our staff need to feel a level of comfort with the procedure and deep appreciation of its complex, nuanced meaning, not only in the lives of our patients, but in their own lives." And she says this in the context of shortly after George Tiller's death, when they were making the decision in their clinic to move from second trimester into third trimester care to fill a gap in care left behind George's murder. What have you learned from your staff over the years? Staff who have had to cross rabid, screaming picketers, staff who have weathered your clinic being arsoned twice, staff who have seen extreme social situations that your patients bring into the clinic when seeking abortion services.
What I've learned from staff is, first and foremost, what a pleasure they are to work with. Almost exclusively female, bright, committed young women, and they're just a joy to work with, and a joy to watch them form a cohesive team and enjoy working with one another. So first and foremost, I want to stress what a pleasure this work is. I've also learned how very courageous they are. They do walk that line, across that line each and every day. And I've also learned that I'm certainly not alone as a female being very fierce and stubborn. What else about staff? That, like our patients, they surprise themselves. And the example that you bring up with when we took on third trimester care, which is really a whole different creature, we met as a full staff and met with the two women doctors that Dr. Tiller had trained and were then out of work and professionally homeless. And our staff asked them such deep, thoughtful, intelligent questions, and they openly shared with us their concerns about whether or not they thought that they could do this. And we had two people on the staff who said, "I understand why you want to do this. I support it. I don't think I can do it. So we looked for other positions within the clinic for those people. And that's where they started, was in a different position where they weren't dealing with the patient through the labor process. And the remainder of the staff were gung-ho, this is a great idea. Within 6 to 8 months, several of the staff members who were gung-ho and believed that they absolutely wanted to do this found it impossible. And it wasn't that they didn't believe in what we were doing or support the patients. They just physically or emotionally couldn't do it on a daily basis and said so. Now, one of them finished her doctorate and got the job of her dreams as an anthropology professor. Another married and went on to have children. So they surprised themselves, and they were very open with us and with their fellow staff about that. The two people who were fairly sure they weren't going to be able to do this stayed with us until the end of their careers. And that is so mirroring of the way I've always maintained and been taught this by patients, that what you think in the abstract, you will do in a lot of situations. And what you actually feel and decide to do at the time, if that becomes an issue for you, whether it's major surgery for a cancer that's been recently diagnosed, or, this is not particular to abortion at all. The truth is, you don't know for sure until it's you in that moment. And the most important question for patients and for staff is, how will you feel about yourself over time when all is said and done? You've got the person you have to live with is yourself.
Let me add something to that. That's my experience too, but I want to mention abortion. Depending on what's abortion is abortion. It's very different from depending on the gestation, and there are a lot of changes through that. The techniques you have to use, medications. I stopped initially in the 70s. I was already at 24 weeks. I went there very fast, but carefully, very carefully. But I didn't waste time because I was doing a lot of procedures, so I had plenty of time to do one. All we have is pelvic exams and menstrual history. So didn't exist. Well, it's pretty accurate. Menstrual history is pretty accurate. Pelvic exams are quite accurate most of the time, but there are some big variations. So if I was going to go to 10 weeks, I'd find myself doing something 11 weeks. And I think, well, it went okay, but I wouldn't plan to go to 11 weeks, but I keep doing 10 weeks, but I do someone else for 11 weeks. So now I've done 2 women who were 11 weeks, and I had no problem. So now we'll go to 11 weeks. So I went 11 weeks, 12 weeks, 13 weeks, it kept going up. I did it slowly, week by week. Every time I had a problem, I analyzed that problem. Why was I having such difficulty? I had a complication. When did I have it? How could I prevent it? What to do about it? So that's the way I went. So soon I was at 24 weeks. 25 weeks is really, it's hard to go beyond that because you can't dilate the cervix enough. Without, you risk rupturing the cervix. You just cannot, sometimes it'll give, sometimes it will not. So it has its own mind. The cervix is some medical terms, the cervix is queen. For those of the doctors in the audience. So I quit. I thought, I'm not going to push this through. I could dilate, but it took me a long time to dilate, you know, for these higher levels. So then became, what changed it? Misoprostol. If those misoprostol is a medication that came out, you give it. It helps to soften and dilate the cervix. You give misoprostol, and then you can deliver to anyone to any gestation. Even you can start labor. There's no limit. So now that changed it. And that's what George Tiller started using. Now, George first came to me to learn how to do second trimester abortions. And I taught him what I knew, as I did many other doctors. I had no secrets. I would teach anyone anything I knew. But then he started doing these later ones, and he said, well, I could do those. I said, well, I'll let you do those. I don't. But I did end up going to 28 weeks. But quiet, I never promoted it. I just did patients who came to me, I would go to 28 weeks using the misoprostol, and it worked really well. But when George was murdered, then I thought, oh, someone had to replace him. And there were people in the National Abortion Federation who wanted me to do that. And we decided we would. So we employed the two doctors, women doctors who worked for him, and we took on that program. So that's just an interjection.
I'll close with the last question about our patients. So Curtis and Glenna, within this book, you weave real, anonymized patient stories that are formative to you in your path. Understandably, these formative patients have highly emotional situations. Your first patient threatening suicide, your first patient death after an abortion, patients with horrific domestic violence or extremely young teenagers that compelled you to expand your services. You also start each chapter with a patient quote from the diary-like notebook that you keep in the recovery room for patients to write and reflect in after their procedures. My favorite patient quote from these notebooks is, I quote, I've made plenty of mistakes in my time, but I do not believe this is a mistake. What I like about these quotes is that unlike the highly memorable patients you include in your stories, these patients give greater understanding into the typical abortion experience. The idea that the decision was not tumultuous or laborious, and that for the majority of patients, the abortion was not sad, but rather liberating. Glenna, you express this when you write, quote, patients taught me that the abortion was seldom a crisis. The pregnancy is a crisis. Abortion is the resolution of that crisis. The most common emotion patients expressed after the abortion is relief. What have you learned from these patient writings in your recovery room over the years? And what do you want our audience to know about the patients who make the decision to have an abortion?
Is this working? Oh, good. Part of what has been so engaging and kept me interested in this work all these years is that although occasionally the abortion is a crisis for a woman and we need to be prepared to deal with that, by and large it's not. But very frequently it is a wake-up call, life-altering experience, a change in course. We regularly saw women who decided to leave an abusive relationship that they were in. Now, abusive relationships are I've learned, are far more common than I would like to believe that they are. And what's so fascinating to me is these are women who were willing to, had stayed within that relationship until they became pregnant. And what they realized was they wouldn't bring a child into that relationship. Well, if you won't bring a child into the relationship, why are you doing this to yourself? Is the question, not that I asked, but that they posed to themselves. That is a slightly more dramatic example. But what has made the work so gratifying is that when we routinely allow time for women to talk about what this means. And the meaning isn't that it's a crisis. The meaning is that I am realizing what I really want to do with my life. I am recommitting to myself, my goals, my dreams. I want to create a life for myself and a life for a potential child that I would have, that I would feel proud to be a part of. So it's it's a wake-up call. The other thing, let me think about this. That comes across loud and clear in the journal entries and busts one of the myths, lies about women who are choosing to have an abortion is that aborting a pregnancy is a rejection of the sacred role of motherhood. What we see are women choosing to have an abortion because they want to be the best mother that they can be. And they know that for one reason or another, they can't do that right now. So it's in a surprising way, it is an affirmation of how important the role of being a mother is and the responsibility they feel to do the best job that they can.
What I've been along those lines impressed with is we deal with young women. I think there may be many young men who would be the same way. Some not saying that young men are not have some of these qualities. Some we just with women. So I know what. But these young women, I was amazed at how deep sometimes their thinking was. That's what Glenna was just sharing. It was, wow. I mean, these are some of these young women. They didn't finish high school. And yet, and I remember one young woman, like, she didn't finish high school. She had one child, but she was with a man. She thought a committed relationship. She thought things were going well. She got pregnant, and but they couldn't afford another child. She didn't have the money, and so. But she she did think about continuing. She talked to him about continuing the pregnancy, and he said, "Yeah, but I don't think it's my baby. So I'm not having anything to do with that." And she said, "Wow, that was a shocker, because it was his baby. She had not had sex with any other man. She knew that. She thought, well, she got an abortion, and she ended the relationship. Well, good for her. But see, you think, well, this is a sad story, but actually it's a good story. She recognized she needed to get out of this relationship because it was not the relationship she wanted. She imagined it was, or thought it was. She got out of it. I hope she got into a better one. But what I'm also, I think there are a huge number of poor people in this country who have limited resources, who life is hard. They struggle just from day to day, let alone month to month, trying to just feed themselves and the children they have. Life is hard. And yet, they struggle on, trying to be the best person they can, the best mother they can, they caring about their children. It's really remarkable. So for me, it's a reaffirmation of the resiliency of the human spirit.
The other thing I want to say about those journals is that, and it goes to the heart of how important a sense of community is to all of us, and how damaging the feeling of isolation, shame, and stigma are, that patients write in these journals and they sit in the recovery room. Well, other patients read those, and they're filled with marginal notes where the patient is writing to another patient whom they may or may not ever see. They may be different days, even different years, but they're making marginal notes the way some of us do in our books, saying yes, yes. And the most common note that they write to one another is, "You are not alone."
It's fabulous, Glenna. Thank you. We'll stop this portion, and I would love to hear from any of you that might have any thoughts about the last 52 years of abortion care in the United States, before, what we're experiencing now, anything that you can offer or would like to ask Glenna, Curtis. Feel free to use first names. Yes, in the back. And we'll pass this microphone, I think, if that is acceptable.
Thank you. For many of us who know the two of you for so long and so well, the work that you have given your life to has been revered by everybody who knows the two of you as professionals, as a loving couple, and as deep contributors to society through the work that you've done. I can imagine over the last 50 years, the thousands of lives that you've changed, how you've evolved together in creating those changes for your patients. But I wonder, how do you handle the reality of what has happened since DOPS? And how do you, is there a perspective to put that in? Is there a way that has this impacted the two of you in ways that might be different from other people? And of course I already know the answer to that, but also, like, what advice would you give for all of us in trying to be hopeful for the future through what maybe you have spoken about together and have come to some sort of wisdom that you could share with us?
Oh, why don't I start, because Curtis is the eternal optimist. I wouldn't say that I'm a pessimist. I've always said that I'm a realist. So I was frankly, what I said at the time to our staff, and I actually wrote it in the book, was I saw that we all saw that decision coming. And it reminded me of my mother's death, which I saw coming. She was diagnosed. I watched her die for 2 years. And when she actually stopped breathing, there was still something mind-boggling, shocking, devastating about gone. And I felt that kind of death-like of something I had loved. Loss. And my editor wisely suggested that I'd not dwell on that in the book because I was making myself far too vulnerable, which was great advice. But the truth is, I was absolutely devastated. So I thought about a book written long before the book I wrote about cancer, the title of which was First You Cry. So I cried and I cried with a lot of people on our staff. And then, perfect setup, Curtis.
Well, yeah. But I came to a different feeling rather quickly that I was devastated at first, but then I realized, no, everything has not been lost. I knew where I started 55 years ago. We've made a lot of progress. There are half the states where it's still legal. We have a lot of huge population and that support this, politicians. No, we've been set back, a huge setback, but all is far from being lost. And I've had this suddenness thought, I believe the Supreme Court has just kicked the hornet's nest. And that's what was sort of like, ooh, I hope. And they did, you see. Because now, 70% of the women, people in this country who are supporting abortion rights, they're not Democrats. We don't have a 70% Democratic country. These are Republican women, mostly men too. But why? Because that overrides everything else. That overrides the political issue. This has to do with women's place in society. So it's my belief that I kind of think of this as an arch. Women, all these things that build women's, this is an arch. But something has to hold that arch up. That's the capstone. And the capstone is going to sustain further human rights. It's abortion rights. Because why do I think that? Because if a woman cannot have autonomy over her own body, she can never be free. So all the other becomes irrelevant. She's never going to get there. She may get a long way, but she's never going to fully get there if she doesn't have autonomy over her own body. And I think women and what I'm believing now, they're not going to accept that. And men are not accepting it either. So the switch in men has not been as great as in women because it's obviously much more personal. It's the woman's issue, but men are switching some too. So that was my optimism. In the end, we're going to win. I didn't know. I thought it might be after I'm dead, but it's all right. We're going to win. Now I don't think that. I think we're going to win this election. See, that's how quick it turned around. So what can you do? Vote. But it doesn't do any good to vote in Massachusetts. No, what you got to do is call all your friends. Vote. Call all your friends in these other states and get them to vote for all these states where the election is close. If you know them, call them, route them, plead with them, get the vote out, because it's made here, but elsewhere it's not. We must win this election. Now, if we don't, I am going to be devastated.
Other questions, thoughts, reflections?
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I wondered, there's so much, with so many bans across the country, there is so much discussion, especially in election season, of what exceptions are okay to abortion bans that make an abortion okay, which I think, contributes to a discourse of there are good abortions and bad abortions. And I wondered if you both could share a little bit of your perspective of providers of what it could feel like to be faced with that burden to figure out and try to interpret, when a patient fits into the right bucket to be able to provide the care that you're dedicated to, and trained to provide.
Simple answer, but it's all wrong. To decide what is a good enough reason in your mind, as opposed to what does this this person whose life is being lived need at this time. We don't get to make those kinds of decisions for other people in a fair and just world. We each get to make our own decisions, period.
And that means we get to make our own mistakes. No, I mean, what, if we get to make our own mistakes, you see, we don't have to let someone else make them. I want to tell you this story. Justice Kennedy was a Supreme Court justice, long gone, but they heard a case in California. They were trying to prohibit second trimester abortions. He voted to prohibit them. He lost. We won that issue in the Supreme Court. But Justice Kennedy, so listen carefully to what he said, because I tell that some people, they don't quite get it. I think everyone in this room will get it. But he said, he was making this opposition, he thought his concern was that the woman might come to regret her decision. Sounds pretty reasonable, doesn't it? I mean, so for some people that seemed, well, yeah, she might regret her decision. But the question is, where's I'm coming to regret? Do you think she's more likely to regret the decision she made, was allowed to freely make, or more likely to regret the decision that Justice Kennedy made for her and forced upon her? Which one is she more likely to regret, if there is regret? And usually there is not regret. But she gets to make her own decisions, regret or not. Someone else doesn't get to make that decision to protect the little lady. No, you don't get to do that. And so it's early in the days, we started in the 70s, the doctors argued about this. All the staff, there were nurses there, counselors, they thought there were reasons you shouldn't have it. Too late, they didn't say it late. The terms were they were very much opposed to. They thought abortion for quote birth control was terrible. Well, abortion is birth control. I mean, come on. I mean, well, when you're, it's that kind of issue. There was a lot of that infighting. I always fought for none of those restrictions. I think the woman, she's got to make her decision, and women are not frivolous about this. You get over that, get over it. That's why this is late-term abortion. I can't use it for birth control. Most women don't use it for birth control, but it is a birth control method. And in later pregnancies, we found that women don't seek really a late-term abortion of 40 weeks, 30 weeks, not 30 weeks, 30 weeks. They don't seek these abortions except these for compelling reasons. Now, I want to be fair about this, because people say, well, some of this, what I'm putting in the compelling reason category doesn't belong there. One is maternal life and health, and none is non-viability of the fetus, but there are also psychosocial compelling reasons, like drug addiction and mental illness, and I can go on and on. So they say, no, she's not going to. So you have to, I'm picking more broader, what are compelling reasons. So I'm just wanting to be fair when I say, they say, well, Dr. Well, that's not true, they give it these reasons. I said, well, I put that in the psychosocial compelling category. So I think they do it for what they consider compelling reasons. Whether someone else considers it a compelling reason or not, and it's sort of irrelevant what I consider a compelling reason or not, unless I'm just not willing to do the abortion because of it. For them, it was a compelling reason, and they tell me that compelling reason. I want to tell you a story. I love telling stories. So this woman called up she was from the South. She was not married. She had 5 or 6 children. She was living on welfare, desperately poor. And this is when we first started thinking of George Tiller's. The doctors there had been taught woman had to give a reason for. So that was okay. But that was the practice. I didn't like that. I didn't want it, but that's the way they did it. They wanted to do it that way. Until I finally got rid of that. But this woman called up, and so the counselor was saying, so why do you need to, she wanted the reason, why do you need to have this abortion? And so the woman, the counselor on the phone asked her about 3 times, because she wanted to give her a reason so she could put it on the chart. And she said, in fact, she said, and she said, well, so what you need to do, of course, if you're really knowledgeable, you know, I'm going to kill myself. That's it. Come right on in. We can do your abortion. See, suicide, that was an acceptable reason. So the counselors wanted to say, I'm going to kill myself. This woman said, what the fuck do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to have another baby. This is a strong woman. No, she's not going to kill herself. She's not like that. She said, I have 5 children. I didn't want all of them. I can't feed the ones I have now. But if you can't help me, what can I do? I'm going to have another baby. And I'll just have to find a way to survive. You see, that women are, these are strong women. Being poor doesn't change that. She's a strong, determined woman. And she is not about to kill herself. She's got 5 other children. She's still got to try to keep alive. No. I love that story.
The idea of giving reasons to, I don't know, the idea of giving reasons smacks of like the 1950s and 60s when you had to go in front of boards and plead your case and have a board of predominantly men determine the level of deservedness of whether or not your case was compelling or not. And I think most of us turn to George Tiller's quote, trust women, as our mantra for how we answer that question. And trust women, and anything you think you know the answer to, I guarantee these guys can give you a story that will make you question everything that you think you know about abortion services. Maybe one more question if we could. Yep.
I'm wondering from your decades of work in this area, whether you have noticed that there's anything in our language that actually gets in the way or that drives thinking kind of into a dead end. So for example, the difference between women's right to choose versus reproductive rights. You know, so have you noticed anything in the language, and if so, what, and what language would you change?
Choose, well, that, we don't use choose anyway, that for that very reason, because, one reason, because it is misunderstood, that thing that was elective. Well, it could be, that's okay, but people, somehow elective is a bad word. Elective, that's a bad word. So, the woman was elected to have an abortion. She has a right to choose to have an abortion. She has a right to elect to have an abortion, but it doesn't sell. So if you're talking about so as well, but what? So we think of it in a different way. That the woman, but she has the right to make that decision of what is best for her and her family, and so we don't. She's not what she chooses to do. To her, it often it has to. And I'll tell you what really got me on that. I was asking people when I found out, but they're choosing, and she said, "Doctor, you wouldn't do an abortion on a woman if she's been compelled to do it. It'd be her choice." And she said, "Well, Dr. Boyd, I really don't have a choice." I said, "Well, yes, you have a choice." She said, "No, I don't. I have to have this abortion." And I said, "Well, why?" But she had to have it for her reasons. No one was making her. She said, and she told me, she says her story, and you say, "Well, yes, you need to have this abortion. I agree with you." She said, but for her, it's not. She's started to realize, no, women don't come feeling it's a choice. They feel like they have a need to have this abortion because of their life situation. And I think people can understand that. She's saying this is best for the children I have, the children I want to have, whatever her reasons are. She has reasons saying this is what I need to do. People understand that.
We can have a conversation later. Words and language are important. But Yeah, that they are
Right.
important. However, what I would choose to close this part of the conversation with about that is I believe that the mistake historically that people like me have made is that while those who are adamantly opposed to abortion speak only about the unborn, and we have chosen to speak only about the woman. And what I know from patients is that they are making this decision, not choice, but it's both of those things. Often because they care deeply about the life of which they feel they are an agent and they are responsible. So we've been speaking past each other, and failing to listen to deeply felt beliefs and to show respect for those, not disrespect. So I think as important as the words that we choose to use for our own cause, it's equally important that we don't denigrate those who disagree with us by calling them names. The name calling, the demonizing, the disparaging labeling that goes on both ways does all of us a disservice. And that's what we've tried to avoid in our approach
We
with the
worked
book.
hard on language, because as you said, it is important. It makes a difference how you're going to state these things, how it's going to be accepted. But even getting the meaning right, but then you have to think, and it's fair to think, what are the political implications? What are the general public's perception? So, but what we have learned, that what Glenna said is so important. Women, when they get into these dilemmas, they have the abortion because they care about their pregnancy, not because they don't care. It's not that they don't care about the pregnancy. We don't see that. Women, they may care about their life, their future. They may care about the children they have. They may care about the life this pregnancy, the child born of this pregnancy would have. But they make it based on their projection, those kind of projections. It's used, pregnant women are not selfish, hardly ever selfish. No, that they're thinking of the children they have now, the children they want to have in the future. They're thinking of their marriage. They're thinking of feeding the children they have, the children that would have. I mean, they do it thoughtfully. They do it thoughtfully and responsibly. That's been our experience, and that's what shocks most people are anti. Well, they can't. No, they can't believe that. That's our experience, though.
Glenna, you talk about language very nicely in the book as it relates to allowing the patient and using the language that the patient uses and parroting her language.
Yes.
With a recognition that everybody kind of compartmentalizes, identifies differently, and with the pregnancy and what have you, and not to get stuck in a rut with our own language and rhetoric with
Exactly.
patients and actually
Exactly.
use their
That's
language.
what Glenna's taught our staff and taught me. Don't use listen to what the patient's saying. Use her language. Don't use your medical language, or don't use the patient's language. If that's what she uses, she's okay with that. So.
Great. So we'll be up here in front. Love to hear from you. Come up and chat.